On a remote, hostile world far from Earth, Ray's Kellen was no stranger to danger. A battle-hardened human soldier, he had seen the worst that space had to offer: alien fleets, treacherous landscapes, and deadly encounters. Yet nothing could have prepared him for the events that unfolded on the planet Tyrex, a world controlled by the ruthless Gyrex, an alien race that held dominion over countless other species. Ray's mission was simple: scout, gather intel, and return home. But things quickly went awry when his ship was attacked by a Gyrex warship while in orbit. His craft was torn apart, and he was forced to crash land on Tyrex. The planet was no paradise. The air was thick and heavy and strange. Pulsating lights flickered in the distance. As Ray staggered out of his wrecked ship, wounded and disoriented, he realized he was stranded on an alien world with no immediate way to escape. With no allies in sight, Ray's moved cautiously through the dense, eerie jungle, his instincts sharpening. Every noise was a potential threat, whether it be the rustle of the wind through the trees or the distant howl of some unknown creature. The Gyrex had a reputation for hunting down intruders, and though Ray's was a trained soldier, he couldn't afford to underestimate his enemies. For hours he trekked through the jungle, his wounds growing more painful with each step. His mind was consumed with thoughts of survival. He had no radio signal, no backup, and he wasn't sure how long he would be able to keep going before the Gyrex found him. But then, just as hope seemed to slip through his fingers, he saw something unusual. Through the trees, he spotted a figure, a humanoid shape, standing tall and graceful, almost ethereal against the backdrop of the dark forest. The figure stepped closer, and Ray's heart skipped a beat as the light revealed more of her features. She was tall, her skin a shimmering shade of lavender, with long, silver hair cascading down her back. Her eyes, a glowing violet, glimmered like twin stars in the dim light of the jungle. This wasn't just any alien. This was a Gyrex, a member of the race that ruled this world. Ray's instinctively reached for his weapon, but the woman raised a hand, signaling for him to stop. Her presence was commanding, yet strangely peaceful. There was something about her that didn't fit the stereotype of the cold and ruthless Gyrex soldiers he had been trained to fear. She smiled at him, though there was an air of mystery about her, as if she knew something he didn't. "I was expecting someone like you," the woman said, her voice smooth and melodic, yet it held an undeniable power. Human. And yet, not like the others. Her words were cryptic, but they held a depth that intrigued Ray's. "You are not meant to be here," she continued. "Yet here you are, and I have chosen you." Ray's blinked, confused and wary. Chosen? What did she mean by that? He had been taught to never trust the Gyrex, especially not one who looked so different. But there was something undeniable in her presence, an aura of intelligence and strength that pulled at him. His training told him to stay cautious, yet there was an inexplicable feeling stirring inside him, something he couldn't name but couldn't ignore either. The woman took a step forward, lowering her hand, and Ray's found himself unable to resist the pull of her gaze. "My name is Zarel," she said softly. "I will keep you safe, for now." Ray's didn't know what to make of it. This alien, this Gyrex woman, had just chosen him, an unexpected decision that made no sense. Her people were known for their cruelty, their hunger for power. Why would she protect him, of all people? Yet as she spoke, Ray's couldn't shake the feeling that his fate had somehow changed in this strange, unpredictable encounter. What was her game? What did she want with him? And more importantly, what did she mean by chosen? As the shadows of the jungle deepened around them, Ray's knew one thing for certain: his journey on this alien world had only just begun. Ray's Kellen followed Zarel through the dense jungle, his mind swirling with questions he couldn't answer. Despite the odd warmth in her voice, the fact that she was a Gyrex, a member of the ruthless alien race who had enslaved countless species, made it hard to trust her. Yet there was something about her that was different from the cold, calculating warriors he had read about. She moved with an effortless grace, as if she was at home in the wild, yet her every step was careful, as if she were watching for something or someone. It didn't take long for Reyes to realize that this wasn't a typical Jyrek soldier. She wasn't guiding him to a prison or a battlefield. She was leading him somewhere, and the further they went, the more Reyes' unease grew. They arrived at a hidden clearing, far from the path of the Jyrek's forces, where large crystalline structures towered above them. It looked like some kind of ancient sanctuary, a place untouched by the war that raged outside its walls. "This is where I stay," Zyrel said, turning to face Reyes. "It's safe here for now, but it won't be for long. They'll come looking for us." Her voice was calm, but there was a flicker of something behind her eyes, something that spoke of a deep understanding of the dangers ahead. Reyes felt the weight of her words. He didn't know who they were exactly, but from the way she spoke, he knew the Jyreks weren't the only threat here. Zyrel motioned for him to follow her deeper into the sanctuary. The air was cool and smelled faintly of something sweet and earthy. The ground was covered in a soft moss, and glowing vines wrapped around the towering crystal structures like veins of light. It was beautiful, peaceful even, but something told Reyes it wasn't just a retreat. There was power here, an ancient energy he couldn't fully comprehend. "I don't understand," Reyes began, his voice low. "Why are you helping me? Your Jyreks, your people." He stopped himself. It was hard to speak about the Jyreks without the anger bubbling up inside him. His people had suffered enough at their hands. But Zyrel interrupted him before he could finish. "I am not like the others," she said softly, her gaze piercing his with an intensity that made him feel exposed. "I've seen what my people have done. I've seen what they've become. It's not who we were meant to be. And that's why I brought you here." Her word hung in the air, thick with meaning. "Brought me here," Reyes repeated, confused. He had thought she was saving him from the Jyreks, but now it sounded like there was something more to this, something he didn't understand. Zyrel stepped closer to him, her violet eyes unwavering. "You don't know it yet, but you're part of something much bigger than you think. I didn't just choose you because you're human. I chose you because you're the key." Reyes' brow furrowed, his mind racing to make sense of her cryptic words. "The key to what?" Zyrel sighed, as though deciding whether to share more. "The Jyreks have been hunting for something for a long time, something that can give them ultimate power, but they don't understand it. They never have. It's not something that can be controlled." She paused, her voice softening. "It's a part of me, and a part of you." Reyes stood frozen, trying to process what she was saying. Was she talking about some kind of weapon, a force he had no knowledge of? What did she mean that it was part of both of them? Zyrel continued, "I know it's hard to believe, but the bond between us is more than just coincidence. There's a reason we've crossed paths. The Jyreks have been searching for something like you for centuries, but they'll never find it. They'll never understand it, because it's not something they can force into submission. You and I, we are connected, and I'm the only one who can guide you to what's hidden." Reyes' heart pounded in his chest as he tried to understand. He had come here thinking it was just another mission, another fight to survive. But this was something he could never have anticipated. Something bigger than him, bigger than anything he had ever imagined. "I didn't ask for this," he muttered, though the words felt hollow, even to him. "You don't need to ask for it," Zyrel said, her voice firm but gentle. "This is your destiny now, and whether you're ready or not, it will change everything. For you, for me, for both our peoples." Reyes looked at her, eyes narrowing. "Why me?" Zyrel met his gaze with unwavering certainty. "Because Reyes Kellen, you are more than just a soldier. You're the one who will end this war." Reyes Kellen sat in silence, his mind spinning with Zyrel's words. She had just told him that he was the key to ending the war, but he couldn't wrap his head around what that really meant. He was a soldier, trained for combat, not for destiny or ancient powers. The idea that he could play a part in something so monumental felt almost absurd. Yet the weight of her gaze, the way she spoke with such certainty, made him hesitate. There was no doubting that she believed it. And in his gut, something told him that maybe she was right. Maybe he had been chosen for a reason he couldn't yet understand. Zarel had left him alone for a few hours, giving him time to rest and think. But the peace of the sanctuary did little to calm his growing unease. The strange energy in the air hummed around him, as if the very planet itself was alive, watching him. He ran his hand through his short black hair, trying to push the thoughts away. He needed clarity, something concrete to hold on to. His mind raced through every possibility, every scenario, but it kept circling back to the same question. What did she mean by the key? When Zarel finally returned, she was carrying something in her hands, a glowing crystal that pulsed softly with an inner light. It looked like nothing he had ever seen before, almost alien in its beauty, and yet there was something strangely familiar about it. She placed it on the ground between them, her violet eyes fixed on him. "This is the artifact," she said, her voice steady but with a hint of reverence. "The Jerichs have been searching for it for centuries, but they have never found it. They believe it holds the power to control everything, to bend the galaxy to their will." She paused, watching Reyes carefully. "But they are wrong. It is not for them to control. It is for someone like you." Reyes leaned forward, his curiosity getting the best of him. "What do you mean, someone like me?" he asked, his voice low but insistent. "What does that thing do?" Zarel's gaze softened, and she looked down at the crystal as if it held all the answers she couldn't put into words. "The artifact holds the truth of the Jerichs, their origins, their purpose. But it is also tied to something older, something that predates them. It is a force of balance, a force of nature. And only someone with the right connection can awaken it." "Why me?" Reyes repeated, his frustration mounting. He didn't understand. He had fought in countless battles, survived death's grip more times than he cared to count. But this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. Zarel's expression was serious now, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because, Reyes, the Jerichs are not native to this world. They came here long ago, drawn to the power of the artifact. They sought to control it, to use it for their own gain. But the artifact would not allow it. It resisted them." She looked up at him, her eyes intense. Reyes's heart skipped a beat. He didn't want to believe it, but there was something about the way she spoke that made him feel like it was true. He looked down at the crystal again, feeling a strange pull toward it, a magnetic force that seemed to call to him. He had always been a man of reason, of logic. But in this moment, in this place, he couldn't deny the feeling that there was something more at work here, something ancient and powerful, something that could change everything. "What do I need to do?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Zarel stood up slowly, her gaze never leaving him. "You need to touch it," she said. "The artifact will reveal what you need to know. It will guide you to the next step, to the heart of the Jerich's empire. But be warned, once you make contact, there is no turning back. The path you will walk will be dangerous, and there will be no guarantees." Reyes took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. His entire life had been about survival. But now, it seemed, survival wasn't enough. There was something greater at stake, something far beyond his understanding. He reached out slowly, his fingers brushing the surface of the glowing crystal. The moment his skin made contact, a jolt of energy surged through his body, and his vision exploded into a kaleidoscope of light and images. He saw the ancient past, the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth of the Jerichs, their brutal conquest of worlds. But then, something shifted. He saw a vision of himself, leading a rebellion, fighting against the very forces that had ruled over countless worlds. The images faded as quickly as they had come, leaving Reyes gasping for breath. He felt different, as if something inside him had awakened. Something he had never known was there before. "This is only the beginning." Zyrel said quietly, her voice filled with both hope and warning. Now you must decide. Will you lead the charge to free our worlds, or will you let the Xerics continue their reign of terror? Reyes stood motionless, his hand still resting on the glowing crystal as the last remnants of the vision faded from his mind. His pulse was racing, his heart pounding in his chest. He had seen things, images of war, of alien forces clashing, of endless suffering. But amid the chaos, he had also seen something else, a vision of hope, of an uprising, of a rebellion against the Xerics, led by someone who looked very much like himself. The crystal had shown him a path he had never asked for but now felt in his very bones. Zyrel had been watching him closely, her eyes full of understanding. She knew what he was feeling. She knew that he was struggling to come to terms with everything that had just been revealed. Reyes had always thought of himself as a soldier, someone who fought for his survival, someone who took orders, followed commands. But now he wasn't so sure what his role was. The vision had shown him something bigger, something that required not just strength, but leadership. Could he really lead an army against the Xerics? Could he really stand up to the alien empire that had caused so much pain and suffering to countless species? The path is not easy, Zyrel said, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm, but there was a sense of urgency behind her words. The Xerics will not let you walk this path without a fight. They will come for you, Reyes. They will come for both of us. Reyes's thoughts were racing. He had always been prepared for a fight, but this was different. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about something far bigger than he had ever imagined. He wasn't just fighting for his life. He was fighting for the future of entire worlds. And with that weight came a responsibility he wasn't sure he was ready for. I didn't ask for this, Reyes muttered, his voice low. He wasn't speaking to Zyrel, but more to himself. I'm just one man. How am I supposed to lead an entire rebellion against the Xerics? Zyrel stepped closer, her violet eyes locked on his. You may be one man, Reyes, but you are not alone. You have the power to rally others to your cause. You have the strength to inspire them, to lead them. You have the heart of a warrior. And now you have something even more powerful, the artifact, and the vision it has shown you. Reyes shook his head, still struggling with the enormity of what lay ahead. What if I fail? He asked, his voice tinged with doubt. What if I'm not the one who can stop the Xerics? What if I'm not what the vision showed? Zyrel's expression softened, her gaze filled with a quiet confidence. You won't fail, she said, her voice steady, because you were never meant to do this alone. You will have allies, other beings who want to see the Xerics fall, beings who have suffered at their hands for far too long. You won't be leading an army of strangers, Reyes. You'll be leading an army of those who share your pain, your hope. Together, you will rise. Reyes met her gaze, the weight of her words settling deep within him. She believed in him, in the vision they had seen together. And though he still had doubts, something inside him stirred. The vision, the crystal, it had shown him something he couldn't ignore. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was the leader of something far greater. And as much as he wanted to push it away, he knew deep down that he couldn't. What do we do next? Reyes asked, his voice quiet but resolute. He had made up his mind. There was no turning back now. Zyrel smiled, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Now we prepare. We must find those who are ready to stand with us. We must rally the oppressed, those who have been crushed under the Xerics' boot. Together, we will strike at the heart of their empire. And we will make them fall. Reyes nodded, a fire igniting within him. He wasn't sure how he would do it, or where to even begin, but one thing was clear. He wasn't going to face this alone. He was going to fight, not just for his survival, but for the survival of countless others. And he was going to lead them into battle against the most powerful empire the galaxy had ever known. The Xerics would fall. The rebellion had begun. Reyes had barely slept that night, his mind still consumed by the enormity of the task ahead. The weight of Zarel's words echoed in his head. The rebellion had begun. It sounded so simple, so clean, but deep down, he knew the reality would be far from it. The Jerichs were a force to be reckoned with. Their empire stretched across countless worlds, their soldiers trained for war from birth. And yet here he was, one human, one soldier, standing at the center of something that could change the fate of entire galaxies. The following day, Zyrel led Reyes to a hidden part of the sanctuary, where a small group of rebels had gathered. They weren't the soldiers Reyes had expected. Instead, they were a diverse mix of different alien species, each one bearing the scars of oppression. There was Kale, a tall, muscular warrior with dark green skin and sharp, intimidating eyes, his body marked by the brutal scars of past battles. Then there was Ilara, a slender, pale-skinned being with translucent wings that shimmered in the light, a race known for their wisdom, but now fighting for survival. And finally, Darius, a quiet, brooding man who had once been a Jerich's officer, but had defected when he realized the Empire's cruelty. His dark brown hair and stern expression hinted at the war-torn past he carried with him. Each of them had their own reasons for joining the rebellion, their own stories of loss, of suffering at the hands of the Jerichs. But one thing they all shared was a fierce determination to see the Empire destroyed. Reyes couldn't help but feel the weight of their gazes as he stepped into the room. These were the people who would follow him, the ones who would look to him for leadership. He wasn't ready for it. He had never asked to be a leader. He was just a soldier, a man who followed orders. But now, standing before these individuals, each of them fighting for something bigger than themselves, he realized there was no turning back. He had to lead. Zarel stood beside him, her eyes watching him closely. She knew what he was feeling. She knew the burden he now carried. But she also knew he could do it. He had the heart of a leader, even if he didn't see it in himself yet. "We don't have much time," Kale said, his voice gruff, as he stepped forward. "The Jerichs are already moving. They know something's happening here, and they won't rest until they wipe us out. We need to strike first." Reyes nodded, his mind still racing. The urgency in Cal's words hit him hard. There was no time to waste. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. "What do we know about their forces?" Reyes asked, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. Ilara spoke up next, her voice soft but filled with conviction. "The Jerichs have a stronghold on the moon Xoloth, just outside the capital city of Jeren. It's heavily guarded, but it's also where they store their most powerful weapons and supplies. If we strike there, we can hit them where it hurts." Reyes' mind clicked into gear as he processed the information. A direct attack on a Jerich stronghold would be risky, but it was their best shot at disrupting the Empire's operations. He could feel the weight of his decision. This was it. There was no turning back now. If they could take down Xoloth, they could cripple the Jerichs' ability to wage war. "How do we get in?" Reyes asked. Darius stepped forward, his voice low. "I know the layout. I was stationed there for years. I know their security protocols, their patrol patterns. We'll need a distraction, something big enough to draw their attention away from our real target." Reyes looked at Darius, the former Jerich's officer, and nodded. "I trust you. Let's make this happen." For the next few hours, they worked together to formulate a plan, each of them contributing their knowledge and skills. The stakes were high, and the risks were even higher, but Reyes could feel the fire building inside him. This was his moment. The Jerichs had taken everything from him, from everyone in this room. And now, they were going to pay. As they finalized their plan, Reyes took a deep breath and looked around the room. These people, these rebels, had placed their trust in him. It was time for him to prove he was worthy of that trust. "The Jerichs won't know what hit them," Reyes said, his voice firm, a new sense of determination in his eyes. Zarel smiled, her gaze filled with pride. "I knew you had it in you." With that, the rebellion moved forward. There was no turning back now. The battle for freedom had begun, and Reyes was ready to lead it. The hours before the attack on Xala felt like a blur to Reyes. There was no time to rest, no time to doubt. The plan had been set, and now they had to execute it. The rebellion was counting on him. He knew the stakes. If they succeeded, they could deal a crushing blow to the Jyriks. If they failed, it would be the end for all of them. Zarel, Kale, Ilara, Darius, and the rest of the rebels had gathered in the war room, a small, dimly lit space inside the sanctuary. Reyes stood at the head of the table, staring at the holographic map of Saloth that projected in front of him. The Jyrik stronghold was heavily fortified, with security systems that made it nearly impossible to breach. But with Darius's insider knowledge, they had a shot. "We have to split into two groups," Darius said, his deep voice cutting through the tension in the room. "The first group will create a diversion. We'll hit the outer perimeter, set off some explosives, and draw their attention away from the main entrance. The second group will go in through the underground tunnels and disable their security systems. Once we're inside, we'll rendezvous at the central weapons depot." Reyes nodded, his mind focused on the mission. "Kale, Ilara, you're with me. We'll be the diversion team. Darius, you and the others take care of the security systems. If we don't get past those, it's over before we even start." Kale grinned, his sharp teeth showing. "You've got it, Reyes. We'll make sure they're too busy with us to notice anything else." Ilara gave a small nod, her wings fluttering softly. "I'll stay close," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of the task ahead. Reyes appreciated the calmness she brought to the group. He needed it. The plan was risky, but it was the best they had. The Jyriks were formidable, but they were not invincible. With the right strike, they could break their hold on the galaxy. Reyes could feel the adrenaline pumping through his veins, and for the first time, he didn't feel like just a soldier. He felt like a leader. He was ready to fight, ready to lead his team into the heart of enemy territory. After a final briefing, they all geared up, strapping on weapons and checking their communication devices. Reyes's fingers tightened around his blaster as he took one last look at the group. They were his responsibility now. He had promised them they would succeed, and he wasn't going to let them down. As they made their way to the transport ship, Reyes couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The air was thick with tension, the kind of silence that always preceded a battle. Zarel walked beside him, her eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for something he couldn't see. "What's wrong?" Reyes asked, noticing her unease. Zarel glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "I don't know. It's just, something feels off. The Jyriks are too quiet." Reyes frowned, the hair on the back of his neck standing up. "You think it's a trap?" "I don't know," she said, her voice laced with uncertainty. "But we can't turn back now." Reyes nodded. They couldn't afford to second-guess themselves. If they hesitated, they would lose the element of surprise. They had to move forward, no matter what. The transport ship soared through the dark sky, heading toward Saloth. The closer they got, the more tense the atmosphere became. Reyes's stomach churned as he looked out the window at the distant stronghold, its towering walls and guarded gates looming like a fortress of despair. They were about to storm the heart of the Jyriks' empire, and every instinct in him screamed to turn away. But he couldn't. Not now. Not when the future of so many worlds depended on this moment. When the ship touched down on a rocky plateau near the stronghold, Reyes took a deep breath. The time for hesitation was over. The rebellion had come to fight. "Let's move," Reyes said, his voice firm. He led the way, his heart pounding with determination. Kale, Ilara, and the rest of the team followed closely behind, ready to give everything for the cause. They approached the stronghold under the cover of darkness, and Reyes could hear the distant hum of the Jyrik security systems. The clock was ticking. Every second counted. Reyes looked to Zarel for confirmation, and she gave a small nod, her eyes focused ahead. "Let's make this count," Reyes muttered under his breath, stepping forward into the unknown. The rebellion had begun in earnest, and now there was no turning back. The moment they set foot on the rocky ground beneath the shadow of Saloth's towering walls, Reyes felt a surge of tension in the air. The transport ship had landed silently, but his instincts screamed that the Jerichs were already aware of their presence. They couldn't afford to waste time. Not now. Every second was precious. They had no margin for error. The rebellion's future depended on this raid, and if they failed, it would mean the end for countless worlds hoping for a glimpse of freedom. Reyes quickly gathered his team. Kale, with his powerful frame, moved forward, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of danger. Ilara fluttered her wings, barely making a sound, her sharp eyes alert. She was the scout of the group, quick and agile. Behind them, Darius and the others moved into position, their footsteps silent against the rocky landscape. "Stay close and stay quiet," Reyes instructed, his voice low and focused. "We go in fast, hit them hard, and get out. We need to reach the central weapons depot before they know what hit them." Darius, who had been a Jerich's officer before defecting, nodded. "I'll guide you to the entrance," he said, his tone calm but filled with the knowledge of someone who had spent years inside their stronghold. "There's an underground passage. We'll use it to get past their main defenses." Reyes couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The Jerichs were notorious for their technology, their surveillance systems nearly impossible to outsmart. If they were ready for them, if they had set a trap. No, he couldn't afford to think like that. They had to keep moving. They approached the hidden entrance Darius had mentioned, a small crack in the side of the mountain where the security cameras wouldn't reach. Reyes took one last glance at his team. The weight of leadership settled on his shoulders, and for a brief moment, doubt crept in. But then he saw the determination in Cal's eyes, the calm resolve in Ilara's face, and the quiet confidence in Darius. These were his people. This was his fight. And they would stand together, no matter the cost. The underground tunnels were cramped, cold, and dark. The air was thick with dust and the smell of damp stone. As they made their way deeper into the belly of the stronghold, Reyes' senses heightened. Every creak of the floor, every distant echo, had him on edge. There was no telling what lay ahead. The Jerichs could have traps, soldiers, or worse, devices capable of detecting their presence. "Keep your eyes open," Reyes muttered, leading the way. His hand gripped his blaster tightly, and he could feel his heartbeat in his throat. He had to stay calm. His team was relying on him to get them through this. Ilara floated slightly ahead, her wings flicking silently as she moved. "We're almost there," she whispered, her voice carrying a calm certainty that helped ease the tension in Reyes' chest. He trusted her instincts more than his own, and right now, they were their best chance. They reached a large chamber deep beneath Saloth. The faint hum of Jerich's machinery filled the air, and Reyes' skin prickled with the sensation of being watched. "This is it," Darius said, motioning toward a series of control panels lining the far wall. "If we can take down the security systems here, the rest of the mission becomes a lot easier." "Then let's move," Reyes said, his voice firm. Kale stepped forward, his massive hands effortlessly cracking open the panel. "I'll handle this," he said, his voice full of confidence. He worked quickly, his hands moving in precise motions as he deactivated the security systems. The countdown had begun. Reyes could feel it. They were close. But just as Kel finished the task, a loud alarm blared through the facility. Reyes' heart skipped a beat. The Jerichs had been waiting. They had known. "Damn it," Reyes muttered under his breath. The security was down, but the alarm had already gone off. They had lost the element of surprise. "Go, go, go," Reyes shouted. "We need to move now." Without hesitation, the team broke into action. Kale led the way, smashing through the door to the next chamber, his fists a blur of motion. Ilara followed closely, her wings cutting through the air as she darted ahead to scout their path. Darius brought up the rear, his weapon raised, ready for any Xeric soldiers who might be lurking in the shadows. Ray's mind raced as they sprinted through the hallways, the sound of alarms echoing in every corner. The rebellion had just gone from covert to full-scale assault, but there was no turning back now. They were in this together, and nothing could stop them. Not the Xerics, not the alarms, and certainly not the fear that had once held him back. The weapons depot was within reach, and with every step, Ray's knew they were one step closer to securing victory. They could do this. They had to. The tension in the air was palpable as Ray's and his team stormed through the halls of Salof's underground complex. The blaring alarms seemed to echo in every corner, alerting the Xeric's forces to their presence. It was no longer a quiet raid. The entire stronghold was on high alert, and they were running out of time. The weapons depot was within their reach, but the path ahead was littered with obstacles. Xeric soldiers, automated defenses, and the ever-present threat of being overwhelmed. Ray's kept his focus sharp, his eyes scanning the surroundings as they moved quickly down the corridor. The team was moving like a well-oiled machine, each member playing their part. Kale led the way, his massive frame pushing forward, clearing out any soldiers that crossed their path with swift precision. Ilara darted ahead, using her speed and agility to scout for any hidden dangers. Darius, ever vigilant, checked the security systems, making sure nothing unexpected would cut them. "This is it," Kale muttered as they approached the final set of doors leading into the weapons depot. The sound of footsteps pounding on the metal floors grew louder behind them. Xeric soldiers were closing in fast. "Move, now," Ray's ordered, urgency in his voice. With a swift motion, Kale swung his arm and slammed his fist into the doors, forcing them open. The team rushed inside, their weapons raised and ready for action. The room before them was massive, filled with rows upon rows of advanced weaponry, energy rifles, plasma bombs, and more, all neatly arranged in storage racks. This was what they had come for. Ray's mind raced as he quickly scanned the room, looking for the most critical supplies to sabotage. The Xerics were powerful, and cutting off their access to these weapons would be a major blow to their war efforts. But just as he moved forward, a blast of energy ripped through the air, striking the far wall with a deafening explosion. The Xeric soldiers had found them. "Ambush," shouted Darius, his voice sharp with alarm. The group dove behind cover, their weapons raised in defense. The Xeric soldiers had set up a perimeter around the depot, and now they were closing in, taking strategic positions around the room. Ray's heart pounded in his chest, but his mind remained clear. This was what they had trained for. They had come this far. They couldn't falter now. "We need to fight back, create a distraction," Ray shouted over the noise of gunfire. "Kale, take the left side. Ilara, hit them from above. Darius, help me secure the weapon crates." Without hesitation, the team sprang into action. Kale charged forward, his massive form barreling through a group of Xeric soldiers, sending them sprawling to the ground. Ilara took to the air, her wings cutting through the air as she darted around the room, firing precise shots that hit their targets with deadly accuracy. Darius and Ray's worked together to sabotage the weapons crates, planting explosive charges that would disable the Xeric's arsenal. The Xeric soldiers were relentless, but Ray's could see the cracks in their formation. They were reacting to the chaos, trying to adapt, but the rebels were faster. The tide of the battle was shifting. With every blast, with every move, Ray's could feel their victory coming closer. "Ilara, watch your six," Kale shouted, his voice booming over the gunfire. Ilara spun in midair just in time to dodge a shot aimed at her, sending a blast back that took down the soldier who had targeted her. The rebels were fighting with everything they had, and Ray's couldn't help but feel a swell of pride for the team around him. They were a unit, bound together by a common cause, and no Xeric's force could break them. "Charges are set," Darius called out, his voice calm despite the chaos. "We're ready to go." Ray's nodded, his heart racing. "Everyone out. Now." With the explosives primed, the team made a swift retreat, using the cover of their gunfire to move back toward the entrance. Ray's eyes were fixed on the timer as it ticked down. Every second felt like an eternity, but the door was within reach. Just as the Jerich's forces began to regroup, the countdown hit 0. The explosion rocked the room, sending shockwaves through the complex. The walls trembled, and the air was filled with the deafening sound of the blast. The weapons depot was no more, and with it, a major part of the Jerich's war machine had been disabled. The rebellion had struck a decisive blow. As the smoke cleared and the dust settled, Reyes felt the weight of the moment. They had done it. They had crippled the Jerichs. But the battle wasn't over. They had to leave, regroup, and prepare for the next fight. The war had only just begun. "Let's get out of here," Reyes said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. The team nodded in unison, their eyes filled with determination. They had won this round, but the fight for freedom was far from finished. As the dust settled from the explosion, Reyes and his team quickly regrouped, their breaths heavy but their resolve unbroken. The weapons depot lay in ruins behind them. The Jerich's war machines they had stolen or destroyed in the blast, now inaccessible to their enemies. For a moment, there was nothing but the ringing in Reyes' ears and the distant hum of machinery, now silenced. The mission had been a success, but they couldn't afford to linger. The Jerichs would retaliate, and they would come fast. "We need to move, now," Reyes ordered, his voice cutting through the tense silence. He glanced around, ensuring that everyone was accounted for. Kale, who had already started toward the exit, gave him a reassuring nod. Ilara was beside him, wings tucked in close, her sharp eyes scanning their surroundings. Darius was keeping watch, his weapon trained on the hallway outside, ever alert for any signs of an ambush. The team quickly made their way back through the tunnels, retracing their steps with military precision. Reyes' heart pounded in his chest, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of battle. Every mission, every success, felt like a small victory in the larger war they were fighting. The Jerichs might be ruthless, but Reyes knew they were capable of more than their enemies realized. They were fighters, survivors, and together, they could bring down the empire that had oppressed them for so long. As they neared the transport ship, the air around them seemed to thicken. The quiet had a weight to it, like the calm before a storm. Reyes could feel the eyes of the Jerichs watching them, tracking their every move. But they couldn't stop now. Not after everything they had fought for. Not after all the lives they had lost to get to this point. "Move, move, move," Reyes shouted, his voice urgent but calm. They reached the transport ship and began to board, the hum of its engines coming to life as they prepared for takeoff. Kale slammed the hatch closed behind them, and the ship's thrusters roared to life, lifting them into the air. Reyes glanced out the window as the stronghold of Saloth receded into the distance, its towering walls now a symbol of their defiance. But their victory felt bittersweet. The mission was only part of the greater struggle. The Jerichs had been dealt a significant blow, but they wouldn't stop. They would come for them. And next time, they might not be so lucky. "We did it," Darius said, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, but Reyes could hear the weight of it. The unspoken truth that the fight was far from over. Reyes nodded, staring out at the stars. "We did, but this is just the beginning. There's a lot more to be done before we win this war." Ilara leaned against the bulkhead, her eyes distant. "The Jerichs won't let this go. They'll come at us with everything they have." "I know," Reyes said, his voice quiet but resolute. "But we'll be ready for them. We'll fight until the very end." Kale, ever the optimist, grinned. "One victory at a time. If we can take down one stronghold, we can take down more." Reyes couldn't help but smile, the fire of determination burning brighter inside him. The rebellion had become more than just a fight for survival. It was a fight for freedom, for hope, and for the future of countless worlds that had been under the Xerxes' cruel grip for far too long. And they weren't going to stop until the last chain was broken. As the ship soared through the stars, Ray's thoughts turned to the future. There would be more battles, more sacrifices, and more victories. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like they had a real chance to win. The rebellion was no longer a fractured group of outcasts. It was a united force, stronger than ever, and nothing would stand in their way. The Xerxes had underestimated them, and they would pay the price. "We'll make them regret ever crossing us," Ray's muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing with determination. And with that, the ship headed toward their next destination, a place where the Xerxes would find that the rebellion was far from finished. The war was far from over. But for now, they had won, and that was enough.